All right, well, I guess it's time to react to some Doomer content then. Why not?
Gen Z doesn't want to work anymore. And between these dogshit wages and this totally broken economy, we should all completely support them on this. But
No, no. This is not what I'm seeing. I'm sorry. Look, there are times, okay, in life where it gets a little bit tricky. But at the end of the day, you still need to work, especially if you're living away from home. You need to work in order to pay your bills, all right? Let's not let's not pretend that that's not a reality anymore. Okay, in until such times as AI takes over and we have, universal basic income, which to be honest, I don't think is going to happen. But until such times as we have that, this claim is a load of rubbish. I'm sorry. Like there are examples of people who are still living at home and are still lazy and things like that. But that's contrary to what this guy's claiming. So anyway, let's continue.
society will collapse if nobody works. This is a common rebuttal from delusional boomers and corporate shills I'm sure you've all heard by now. This
No, it's not about boomers. It's just reality. Like it's just how capitalism works. You have to provide value to society in order to get compensated for it.
actually isn't entirely true. There's a major caveat to the statement, but we'll get into that a bit later. But the main problem with the statement is that this applies to many other things as well, not just work. For example, society will also collapse eventually if nobody has kids. Now, I know historically speaking, people and especially women were shamed for not
Um, I think we're a long way away from that. I think that a lot of the problem with this Doomer content is it kind of negates the fact that there are actually about 7 to 8 billion people on the planet, right? Like, it's a bit like the whole global warming thing. I think, sure, we can make a small difference to it, but I really don't think people actually know how big the problem is. And and what I mean by that is that it's actually not particularly big. I mean, sure, like you could argue that if we recycle more, it will help. But the problem is that that puts all the onus on the consumer. So what my argument with something like that would be is that the corporations obviously need to take more responsibility for their impact on the environment. However, when it comes to birth rates, if it was a big enough problem, we would see a difference in attitudes from world governments, and we are seeing a little bit of that. But I don't think the problem is as big as people think because it's a sort of reactive tale than it is an actual problem. So anyway,
having kids, but we've made a lot of progress on that front. And today, generally speaking, we don't judge, shame, or criticize someone for choosing not to have kids.
no, so people are having children later because they are getting financially stable later. This is what I see. So a lot of the clients who I work with, on average, they're wealthier than your average person. But even when they're financially stable, just have higher standards. I think that's all it is. So I think all that's happening is that it's shifting forward, 10 years because people have that option now. I don't think that's a bad thing.
Don't worry, I'm not one of those weird tradcons trying to force everyone into having kids again. Quite the opposite. I'm a childless 35-year-old millennial myself.
Okay, well, in all fairness, childless 35-year-old millennial, I mean, I don't know. I guess this whole channel is the whole kind of misery loves company thing. But I'm sorry, I'm 25. I have the infrastructure to have children. I'm earning enough to have children. So my question to this guy is, what the heck went wrong? I had to retrain in order to go into my industry. This whole doomer mentality, I'm sorry, I can't get on board with it. But anyway, let's continue to see what he says as a childless 35-year-old millennial who obviously wants other people to share in his misery.
may or may not choose to have kids in the future. I really don't know and don't care right now, to be honest. I'm just pointing out a major logical inconsistency here. The argument that, but society will collapse if nobody works, is always used to hardcore blame, shame, and humiliate people who choose to be unemployed. but the exact same argument can be applied to people who choose not to have kids.
No. The reality is that society won't collapse. All that will happen is that people like you simply will not reproduce. Okay. It's kind of natural selection at play here. So, I mean, if that's the reality that you want to live in, and you're fine with the fact that you're not going to pass on your genes to the next generation, then that's fine. Do your thing, mate.
Kids. Society will also eventually collapse if everyone stops having kids. This is just a fact, and it's already happening right now in many countries right in front of our eyes as we speak. So, why is it that we generally respect someone's personal choice to not have kids, but we hardcore shame them for their personal choice to not work? Wait, stop. I know what you're thinking.
Well, but it's the same argument. The end result, okay, of you not working and not having children is that you are not going to pass your genes on to the next generation. Okay, you are not going to have children because nobody is going to want to reproduce with you. You aren't going to create enough economic abundance that somebody is going to want to spend enough time with you and to rely on you for their stability. That's not the world's fault. That's your fault. I mean, I don't know what to say to you.
Thinking it's because if you don't work, then you're a burden to others who do work.
Well, but yeah, you literally are.
But wait, once again, this exact same argument can also be applied to those who choose not to have kids. Somebody who puts in the immense time, money, and energy investment into raising kids is raising a future worker for society. And when this kid grows up, he will eventually have to pay for the social security check of someone who didn't have kids. So it's funny to me how we relentlessly complain about paying a few extra tax dollars to support struggling families on welfare. Why should I have to pay for somebody else's kids?
Look, it depends on what your priorities are. Okay, the reality is, yes, it is a sacrifice, and yes, there are things that you'll have to do, that your kids will have to do, in order to, in order to have the life. And yes, they will inevitably pay taxes and support other people, but you know, if look, if you're saying to yourself, I'm not going to contribute to society because I don't want my children to be like slaves for other people, then that's fine. But you have to realize that your trade off is that you are effectively ending your bloodline there. Okay. And you're fine with that. And you're fine with being, a self professed millennial 35-year-old doomer, essentially. You're fine with that reality. And if you are fine with that reality, and all because of the premise that you don't want to contribute to society, then I don't know what to tell you. You'll get exactly the outcome that you ask for.
Right? And yeah, I highly doubt we'll be complaining about welfare when these kids grow up and have to pay our social security. So, who's really the burden on who here? Now, once again, I want to reiterate that I'm not telling you to have kids. I'm not even sure if I want them myself. I'm just asking.
Well, by this point, you're 35, mate. I mean, sorry, but your pool is very limited. So even if you do want them, you're probably going to struggle. In fact, I mean, I do know people who got married later and then had kids later. But it's a fraction of a percent of people. So I mean, I don't know. You better crack on, mate, because you can't. Do you know what I mean? If you do want them, you can't stay indecisive forever.
A simple question here. If everyone chooses to stop having kids, society will collapse. Just like if everyone chooses to stop working, society will collapse.
Okay, so do you want society to collapse? And is that the whole point of this video? Is that you want society to collapse? So you're not going to have clean water anymore. You're not going to have electricity. But people who operate like this, they're essentially parasites. They essentially say, hey, as long as I don't have to do anything, then things are going to still operate. What he's essentially saying, I don't want to do these things. That's what he's essentially saying, but I still want to extract value from society. But that's not how a society works. Um, if everybody thought like this, then we would probably still be farmers, and we would still have a subsistence way of living where we're just working 12 hours a day in a field. But fortunately, we don't have to do that anymore because people, contributed.
So, why do we respect their decision to not have kids, but we relentlessly hardcore shame them for their decision to not work?
Because that's how value works. In order for you to get something from somebody else, you have to have provided value yourself. Okay, nobody does things for free. So if you decide to not work, then I don't know what to tell you. Of course, not going to be able to get what you want.
Well, I did some digging, and as it turns out, it's just another psyop, another psychological manipulation tactic from delusional boomers and corporate shills used to blame, shame, and gaslight you into accepting these dog shit low wages and slavery-esque working conditions.
Okay, if you don't want that outcome that you're describing right now, I would really suggest that you figure out a way to work for yourself. And it looks like he is anyway, because he's making YouTube videos. So obviously, I think his goal is to make money from advertising revenue or some course that he's selling or whatever. So actually, he's down the path of working for himself anyway. So he does have some sort of self-awareness. So if you don't want to live the life that he's describing, then you have to work for yourself. That is the end result. That's exactly what you have to do. But actually, I think he's also being a little bit extreme, because there are companies out there, like the company that I work for instance, or work with, because I'm a self-employed advisor. Actually, there are businesses out there that don't give such a terrible work-life balance, but you just have to be able to find them and put yourself in the locations where you can work with these people. So I think he just sort of hasn't had enough experience doing that, but at least he is working for himself at the minute in that case.
That they want to force you into. Hey guys, just wanted to say real quick, thank you all so much for 20,000 subscribers now. Wow, I seriously...
Yeah, I mean, it's commendable. You're doing well. I don't know why I'm even bothering reacting to that. He's gaining subscribers. It's good.
so grateful. I have no words. Like, we're just growing so fast right now. It feels
Okay,
like just
that's
yesterday
boring.
we hit. So, do you remember in the beginning of the video when I told you that the phrase society will collapse if nobody works is not entirely true? It's only true if you add a major caveat to it. Society will collapse if nobody does essential work is the actual true statement here. You all remember not that long ago when the whole world shut down and only those labeled essential workers were allowed to actually keep working. This just totally proved that the overwhelming majority of jobs are not essential. The late great anthropologist David Graeber made a great case for this in his now famous book, Bullshit Jobs. Graeber makes the case that around 50% of jobs serve no real meaning or...
Okay, so why are you complaining? Because if you know that your work has got no real meaning and yet somebody is still prepared to pay you to do it, why are you complaining about that? Doesn't that kind of serve the goal that you're looking to do? Because either you do absolutely nothing and get paid less, or you do something meaningless and get paid even slightly more, but at least you're doing something, even if it has no essential meaning. I mean, sure. Anyway, I mean, YouTube videos are a perfect example of meaningless work. You know what I mean? So he's trying to make videos that's gonna like change the world or whatever. But I mean, come on now, like it really doesn't make that much difference to people's lives. Um, so there we go. He's sort of fulfilling his own prophecy, as it were. In fact, by making YouTube videos as well, he's actually working, whether he likes it or not. So that's quite funny.
Purpose, and he gives several very compelling examples. Perhaps the most iconic one from his book is the doorman at luxury hotels, who spends most of his day dressed in a fancy costume and putting a fake professional look on his face. His only job, so to speak, is to open the door for the rich guests of the luxury hotel. And let's face it, society is not going to collapse if he decides to stop working and rich people have to open their own doors. In fact, not only do these bullshit jobs not contribute to society, a lot of them actually actively harm society.
No, they don't. No, they don't, because they pay taxes on their wages. Well, I wonder what he's going to say. Which of the jobs that harm society?
The best example of this is a corporate lawyer. Everyone agrees monopolies are bad, right? Whether you're a capitalist or a communist, we can all pretty much universally agree that monopolies are bad. Well, a lot of monopolistic companies staff armies of corporate lawyers whose sole purpose is to find and exploit legal loopholes to protect their monopoly. They contribute absolutely no benefit to society. In fact, they actively harm society because by helping maintain monopolies, they stifle healthy competition and innovation.
Okay, so what he's talking about here is rent-seeking behavior. So I do agree with him that that is not good for society if a lot of companies employ that tactic of rent-seeking behavior. However, what I would say is that these companies do expand, and actually you end up getting a much better product at the end of it for the end consumer because of compound interest. Imagine if you had, 500,000 different phone companies. Chances are you would have, I don't know, 499,000 of those be not great phones. In fact, you would probably have 499,000 different phones that are all slightly different from each other, but they're not actually as good as the potentially one. You could argue that Apple's a monopoly, and so is Samsung and the whole Android thing and whatever. But the whole point is that you do actually get a better end product for the consumer. And actually, these bigger companies, even though yes, they come in waves where they have a huge hiring phase and a huge firing phase, then actually on average you end up with a better product and you end up with jobs that are more specific. So I don't know. I mean, the whole monopoly thing is a bit tricky because actually you do end up on average getting a better product for people, and the very fact that he's able to make YouTube videos is a result of natural monopolies. So for instance, YouTube is a natural monopoly over the video space. um, so I don't know. I mean, it seems a bit hypocritical, but there we go.
Call me lazy for being unemployed all you want, even if I contribute nothing to society.
No, but you're not unemployed because you're making YouTube videos, and you probably do something to keep yourself afloat. So you're not unemployed.
At least I'm not actively harming it the way corporate lawyers are. But this does lead to an interesting question and a bit of a paradox. You see, these delusional boomers.
No, I think what this guy actually means is that he's unemployed in the sense that he doesn't have a 9 to 5 job, but that doesn't make you unemployed because you're still probably working more than 16 hours a week. So I don't know what the heck this guy's talking about.
And corporate chills constantly shame Gen Z for not wanting to work with the whole, but society will collapse if no.
Yeah, no, so I do agree with that. If you're being forced to work in a job that you don't enjoy in order to just pay bills, then you do need an escape plan, okay? You do need a method out of, you know, whatever it is you're doing. But at the same time, if you need to work a job, there's no harm in that. It doesn't make you a bad person in working a job and being aware that you are being a bit used and abused at the minute, in order to create a better life for yourself. So I don't know. I mean, there's trade-offs to everything.
Nobody works. Argument. Yeah, have you noticed that the essential workers, the ones who actually keep society from collapsing, they're the ones who get looked down on, spit on, and paid absolute dogshit wages?
I personally don't see that happening in culture. Do you know what I mean? I was recently working with a couple on buying their house, and he was he was working in the trades, she was working in the NHS. Like, nobody's disrespecting these people. Maybe it's just a UK thing that we tend to have more respect for people, but I don't know.
From these same delusional boomers and corporate shills. Part 2, the essential worker paradox. Make no mistake about it, there are absolutely good, hardworking people who keep our society running. Farmers who grow the food that feed all of us, construction workers who build the houses and the infrastructure we all live in. Even grocery store workers, as I'm sure we'd all rather just buy a meal at the store than hunt for it in the wild. Now, if the logic for why we should all be forced to work is, but somebody has to work or society will collapse, I would totally be cool with this argument if the people who did the most essential jobs that keep society running were paid the most, looked up to for being successful, and treated well by society.
Well, that wouldn't work though, would it? Because if they're paid the most, okay, you're not going to get your groceries cheaply, are you? You're not going to get your mobile phone cheaply, are you? Okay, so complaining that these people are not paid the most means that you essentially want to pay a massive premium on the products that you use on a day-to-day basis. And to be honest with you, if you pitch that to this guy, you would say, "Oh no, I don't want to pay any more. I don't have any more money to pay because apparently I'm unemployed." it's just not. It's just not how this works.
If they do the most important jobs, it only makes sense that they get treated the best, right? Yeah, how does society actually treat these very essential workers? It depends on for its survival.
They, on average, treat them actually quite well. Now, the work may not be the most glamorous work, but nobody's spitting on them. I'm sorry, this guy doesn't know. Yeah, I don't think he actually lives in the real world. I think he spends a lot of time behind a screen, and he assumes that people get spat on.
You don't deserve a living wage. You're a low skilled worker. Huh? He works at a grocery store? What a loser. You mean
Um, so I wouldn't say that this necessarily happens. Now, what is true to say is that these people might not be able to buy the same luxuries that they would like to be able to buy, or they might not be able to buy as an expensive house as they would like to buy. Or they might need to, get married earlier and combined incomes quicker. But as I say, if you increase their wages dramatically, that's going to probably cause more of an economic collapse than actually people opting out of the workplace, to be honest with you, because people just simply won't pay for the services.
to tell me you should get $20 an hour for working at Walmart? Ha! This is probably the most disgusting behavior I've noticed when it comes to delusional boomers and corporate shills. These people spend their whole lives treating essential workers like crap and then subsequently performing mental gymnastics to justify it. They pay them like dog shit, treat them like dog shit, look down on them, spit on them, humiliate them, and we all know and have experienced this.
Yes, but you are benefiting from this system. Your groceries are cheaper than they should be. Your technology is cheaper than it should be. I mean, sure, your housing is expensive, but that's a different calculation. But the thing is that the day-to-day things that you use are cheaper based on this system. Making money is actually based on risk. Okay, if you increase the amount of risk that you take, so for instance, being self-employed or running your own business, then chances are, if the risk pays off, you will get paid more than that. Going and getting a job is not risky. Especially with the jobs that he's described, it's not risky at all. So therefore, of course, they are going to get paid less on average because there's no risk involved in what they're doing.
And yet, when it comes time to defend their pathetic, broken system, they suddenly and magically become an essential worker's best friend over.
Yes, but that's the system that we live in. So unless you want to go to a communist country where the system is actually worse and the standard of living is actually worse, then you're kind of stuck with it, mate.
Night. Hey, somebody has to work or society will collapse. This argument is basically using essential workers as a meat shield to protect their joke.
Yes, but your plan of increasing the wages dramatically is probably going to put the society at more risk of collapse because nobody will be able to pay for anything.
of a system that only benefits them. Then, after that, they can go right back to exploiting them for dogshit wages while they sit around doing nothing all day. I can't count how many times I've seen a corporate shill in the comments going, but if you don't work, you're a burden to the farmer who has to work to feed you. Funny thing is, I've never seen a comment like this from an actual farmer himself, only from people exploiting the farmer for their own profits.
I would love to see a source of these comments that he's citing, because I've never heard that myself from these corporate shills.
But here's the truth. Unless you're a farmer yourself, you're going to be a burden to farmers. Here's an interesting historical fact I learned from all my time making these videos. Did you know that a medieval farmer had anywhere between 100 to 150 days of holiday per year? They work less than half the amount a modern farmer has to work.
Okay, so you can actually achieve this if you work for yourself and you pick higher paying jobs than normal people, and you provide a service that people are prepared to pay for that is, cost twice as much. You can do this. It just takes a bit of effort on your behalf. And remember as well, you're referring to peasants. Their standard of living was so low that even with all those extra days, I mean, it probably would have been worse off for them anyway, because they would have been spending their times twiddling their thumbs. They wouldn't have TV to watch. They wouldn't have had fresh, clean water. They wouldn't have had meat to eat. They wouldn't have had anything like that. So their life would have been a lot worse. Sure, they had more time on their hands, potentially, but their standard of living was so low. So I think this guy is just taking everything out of context.
How can this be? You're probably wondering. We have so much better technology and machines today that theoretically should make a modern farmer's job much easier. Well, the answer is because in medieval times, almost everyone did some level of agrarian farm work, while today, less than 2% of the population are farmers, which means they have to work way harder to feed the rest of us. And on top of that, they don't even get paid that well to do so, because like the rest of us, they're being forced to be exploited for capitalist profits.
And you are also benefiting from that. So you can't complain when you can walk to your grocery store. Because remember, it's in America, so they say grocery store. You can go to your grocery store and benefit from this. And yet you're complaining. It seems pretty backwards to me. And actually, yeah, they might work harder, but on average, the standard of living that they can achieve through the level of work that they put in is also a lot higher on average. You won't see a farmer without a smartphone, and you won't see a farmer without hot water. Whereas, the medieval peasants, who knows how they lived? Probably in shacks, in mud huts. I mean, goodness me.
So, if you're so concerned about not being a burden to farmers or essential workers, it's not the unemployed who are the biggest burden to them here. In fact, a rich person working a bullshit job is probably going to be a much bigger burden, given that his consumption needs are going to be much, much higher, and his job either contributes nothing or even actively harms society.
But it's not a burden because he's paying for the service. So he's keeping these people employed and their work useful. I just don't think this guy really understands how anything works, really.
If you're so concerned about society collapsing if nobody wants to work, then you better be prepared to force corporate lawyers, middle managers, CEOs, and all these other useless bullshit jobs to work on a farm or in a grocery store.
I don't think anybody's worried about that. Look, I'm gonna finish reacting to this video soon because I just think it's a load of rubbish. Nobody is complaining about that in any way. If you decide to opt out of the workplace, then it's a winner-take-all economy. That's how capitalism works. It's a winner-take-all economy. So therefore, if you're not prepared to work, then somebody else is prepared to work, and they will take the resources and they will enjoy a standard of living that is higher than yours. So you can opt out of the game if you want, but you have to understand that the trade-off that you're making is a substandard way of living. I'm going to end it there because this is just... Anyway,